Hey CDA, and welcome back to my step-by-step spoiler-free guide to Techtonica. Last time around I showed you how to set up your main base and upgrade your production by a whole lot, and that means it's now time to start making some progress again. I do want to point out from this point onwards there's no such thing as too much production as long as you have the power and fuel to support it, so make sure you have plenty of iron and copper coming in, and feel free to become a little bit creative with how you do that. For example, I have a 2-story mining facility over here with just a layer on top of it. You can actually build these platforms just on top of other buildings and they will neatly connect, so that's really nice and easy to build a tight setup. And remember, you can unlock things like vertical belts, or lifts in other words. So you can have belts moving up and down, you can have vertical belts that actually do not go up and down and they just stretch a chasm if you want. So you can make pretty nice and interesting looking layouts, and you can make this look even better if you get some creativity going with lights and stuff like that. With some of the taller nodes you can make really nice multi-story layouts like this, and if you have plenty of materials coming in, you might want to spread your smelter somewhere else so you have just everything nicely spread out. You can easily expand it if you need to, and moreover you're using the space that you have available to you. Also, don't forget to keep expanding your power network as needed, which you are going to need if you scale up your Kindle vine production, which is probably a good idea because we're going to need a bit more of those plant matter frames, and you can make those straight up from Kindle vine stems now, so you don't need to go through the thresher first. Well, you need this thresher to transform the Kindle vine into the stems, of course, but then you can just put them into a couple of assemblers, making the plant matter frames straight away. Now, this might sound a little weird coming from a guy that really likes his perfect ratios in factory games, but in this game you shouldn't be paying too close attention to that. Of course, once you set things up initially, make sure it's at least in the right ballpark, but you're going to be upgrading your assemblers, your miners, your smelters, everything, and not exactly in the same ratio, so it's going to throw off your builds pretty much every time you upgrade something. So at least it's not going to be producing less. You might want to revisit your older builds every now and then to just make sure that you don't need to add in maybe 1 or 2 machines and get basically free production out of that. But just don't drive yourself crazy optimizing everything all the time. Okay, so progress. Last time around we set up a pretty massive limestone facility in order to make those bio rigs, and we can use the overflow of that to get some of this material to our admin level as well. At our main base, bring in the limestone and upgrade the belts to tier 2 belts while you're at it, so you make sure that all the input you're now generating can actually flow towards your base at optimal speed. And then set up an assembler to absorb at least some of that limestone and semi-automate the calcite platform. And what I mean by semi-automating it, you definitely want to make sure there's a non-stop influx of limestone in here. And you also need some plant matter frames and copper wire, but you can just toss a couple of stacks in here and it will keep running for a very long time because the limestone is going to be the bottleneck. So you want to make sure that at least the limestone is getting in here non-stop. So as you can see, I actually have 4 inserters trying to insert limestone in here, and even that doesn't keep it running all up to speed because as you can see, this can absorb over 1,000 limestone per minute. That's actually more than I can right now get in a single assembler, let alone the other 2 materials that we're going to need in order to make these platforms. That's not really the point though, we just want to make sure we are producing some platforms so we can at some point just swing by and pick up a whole stack. You don't need thousands of these, but still you are going to need a lot of these, so just keep producing them non-stop. As a side note, we're kind of limiting the storage by manually allocating the resources and making sure they are going where we need them to go. But let's say you do automate everything, then you can use the limit storage button to limit the amount of stuff that can actually go into a box. Now, you don't need to do this, it's completely up to you, but it is a way if you completely want to automate everything that to prevent overproducing things like, I don't know, containers and stuff like that you don't need thousands of. Anyway, back to the progress. We want to get to level 7 Excalibur, and in order to do that we can't actually use the Mark 1 mining bits anymore. We need the Mark 2 or the Mark 3 or anything above. We have both of these unlocked, so let's start making some of those. So here's an example of a little drill bit facility. We're making the Mark 1s here. We actually connect these 2 up so the Mark 1s can flow straight into the Mark 2 version. I have a box here just in case, and I also have a box here in the back for every type of drill bit we're making, just so the overflow has somewhere to go in case we're overproducing one while we're running out of materials for the other, just so that it continuously keeps working. Then of course we also have the Mark 3 ones now, for which we apparently need to throw in assemblers. Not entirely sure how that works, but anyway, assemblers and some of those cooling systems that we've been making for a while both of which are very easy to produce, so you should have a nice stockpile of those. Just throw some stuff in here, have it working, and then whenever you get some of these drill bits going, throw them in the elevator so we can start drilling away. While you're waiting for the drill bits to be produced, as well as the drilling to actually be done, you might as well go exploring or opening some of those doors you might have come across that you can now open if you haven't done so yet. Now, if you ever forget where that door is actually located, there's a very easy way to find it. Just activate the quest for that on your menu like this. If you then go to the lift, it will show an exclamation mark where the facility is actually located, and then you can just follow the beacon to get there. And while you're waiting, another thing you might want to do is just go and explore a little bit. There's going to be these tiny little green marks on the map here and there that you can tunnel towards. There's some goodies for you there. There are some hidden areas that are not immediately accessible when you first get to an area that you might need to tunnel through. If that's worth it, I won't spoil that, but at least go and explore. Just the activity itself, by itself, is already fun enough to do so. Oh, and just a tip, if in case you actually drill down a hole into the ground and you want to get back up, the easy way to do that, or at least a easy way to do that, is just to start hovering, build a platform as high as you can without bouncing yourself, and then just start hovering again, and so on, so you kind of make your own elevator. But of course, generally speaking, you should be digging up or down at an angle just to make sure you can easily get back to where you came from. Now, I want to show you a couple of exploration examples, but if you don't want to see this, then by all means skip ahead like 30 or 60 seconds or something like that. But all of these are going to be in Victor level 2, so, well, if you haven't seen them now, you're probably not going to be spotting them by yourself. Anyway, so, on the map, if you look at things like water, for example, usually if you follow the water, there's something interesting to discover there. For example, over here, there is some more copper. There's also typically boxes like in the walls, so I already dug a couple of them out over here, but they were hiding behind the waterfall. And if you delete those storage boxes, they won't be cluttering up your view with like these pesky little green things on your map that you already explored. Now, what you should also be doing is really taking a very close look at your map for any outlines of caves that you might not otherwise have visited yet. So for example, in level 2 Victor, there's this giant cave down here that you can't actually reach until you dig down to it. So definitely do that, because those large areas usually contain not only materials and potentially resources and things like that, but also might contain some nice story elements. So just for that, it's already worth it to explore thoroughly. Speaking of exploration, at this point with the production we have, you should easily be able to unlock areas 7, 8 and 9, or potentially even 10 if you keep going, but you'll quickly run into the issue that you need to unlock certain stuff before you can progress. For example, once you're exploring area level 7, you'll find out that you're going to need some of these mining charges that you can find by opening one of the doors that we encountered earlier. Now, when you unlock the mining charge, we're going to need to craft some of them. So again, we're just going to be adding to our main base. We're also going to need some of that fiber for it, which you can either make through a thresher, just threshing whatever plant material you have, or that you can actually craft in an assembler, which is what I'm going to do, from plant matter. And you probably have a stockpile of that if you have been crafting and removing areas and things like that. So this is my preferred way of doing that. And as usual, part of the reason that I like using assemblers for these things is that you can easily interconnect them without making a whole complicated system, but you can also use a box at the back to easily draw out the overflow. So one way or another, you're basically going to make sure that the fiber is always being produced, but it's also half automated for the main purpose that you're actually creating it. Anyway, take some of these blast caps and go to level 7 and make sure you explore the entire thing. On level 7, you'll also find a new resource to mine, so that's something we'll get back to later. Before we get into that, I highly recommend that you start up your blue science production. You should have completed all the purple science production by now, so you're kind of producing that for nothing. Well, you're producing that because you're going to need it for the blue science, and you're probably sitting on a huge stockpile of that stuff already. So make sure you retrieve those from the core composer if you want to be somewhat efficient. Make sure that you finish up whatever purple science you haven't done yet, and then you should mostly focus on the purple science upgrade in the synthesis tree, because that's just going to make your fuel more efficient, your threshing, your smelters, and so on. So this is all good stuff. We don't quite have that one yet, we'll get that soon enough, but yeah, basically make sure that you upgrade your production wherever you can. In Sector 7, along with some very nice story elements, you will also find a couple of Mark II assemblers. I recommend that you use these to upgrade your base production, so just the base materials, and work your way upwards from the bottom, basically, because this will double your production out of all of this, and that means you have twice as many resources to divide across all your other machines. Once you explored level 7, you'll be able to also explore level 8 for the most part at least, and there's going to be a whole lot more story and a whole lot more unlocks in there, but you're also going to find some crank generators Mark II. You might have already found a couple of them, but there's quite a few in that particular zone. Now, these are going to be immense help in actually cranking up the power, literally, because these are generating 1,000 kilowatts each, where the other ones were just producing 150. So it's a lot more space efficient way to generate a huge amount of power. Then in level 8, you're going to be able to find even more of these Mark II assemblers, and I would recommend that you upgrade the remaining base production that you have, and then start working on things like science and drill bits. Those are things you can never have too many of, so you might as well double your production of them. If you want some more Mark II assemblers and even maybe a couple of Mark II smelters, then you should definitely keep exploring, including a level 9, because there's a lot of nice materials there as well, again, along with some more story. However, at that point, you might be tempted to just keep drilling and going up and exploring, which honestly you could. However, it's kind of counterproductive at this point, because we also want to progress a little bit. So let's start working on some upgrades to Victor. So first of all, we're going to need some mining charges and monorail depots to upgrade it, but we're also going to need some power, and this is kind of a new element to this. So what you want to do is build yourself a nice little battery pack. Connect Victor to the power grid by actually connecting it up with a voltage stepper and a little power cable. And then assuming you built your battery pack large enough, you should be able to upgrade it to tier 4. For the next level of Victor, aside from extending your battery pack, you're also going to need a whole lot of belts. Well, you should have those by now, so that's not really a problem. But you're also going to need some Atlantum ingots. In order to get that automated, we're going to need the Mark II mining drill, because the normal mining drill doesn't actually have enough power to drill Atlantum ore. And while you're at it, make sure you also pick up the mining speed increase, because this is almost going to double your mining production across your entire factory. So that means we extend our little mall with the production of the Mark II mining drill, and considering that needs the Mark I mining drill, you might be wondering why I'm not actually connecting these two things up, because I am also producing, of course, still the Mark I version, but that is because we also need the Mark I version for the mining bits. So you want to make sure you're not basically drawing all of them out into Mark II, because you do still need the Mark Is as well. And well, you might every now and then want to just build a Mark I mining drill rather than the Mark II, although probably at this point you're going to be switching to the Mark II all around. The nice thing about these Mark II mining drills is not only that you can actually mine the Atlantum ore, but you also don't need fuel anymore to make them work. You do need electricity, but honestly that should be pretty trivial to get by now, so just make sure you have enough of that going, set up a belt, and then depending on your personal preference, you might either set up a monorail like I've done over here. I think it's the quickest way to set up a long distance connection, but if you do want to run by means of belts, then of course you can, because keep in mind that the packing speed of these monorails is limited. And I know I've said this before, but I'll just repeat it again just to make sure it's clear. The monorails also help you actually get around. So, you know, that's an advantage, and you don't need to build your foundations all over the place. Keep in mind, you also need to bring your power along with you. Once again, the elevator itself transfers your power between levels. So all you need to do is set up one of these steppers and then connect some cables. Bring the Atlantum ore into your main base. And then you're going to need a little setup like this in order to actually make the ingots. So I am bringing in the ore over here. I'm putting it in a thresher. If you're wondering what this belt is doing, this is mostly to align the box with the other boxes that we have over here that receive the kindle vine and things like that. And the thresher is nicely aligned with the assemblers that I have over here. So just to keep things looking nice and tidy. Then the Atlantum ore is going to be threshed into powder. The powder goes into an assembler. Make sure it's a Mark II one to make sure you are optimizing your production. We're throwing in some of the kindle vine and extract that we're producing elsewhere. Again, just throw in a couple of stacks and this will keep working for a very long time. And then that mixture goes into another box, into a smelter, and then that smelter is going to transform it into ingots, and you'll have plenty of ingots pretty quickly. Which means that now, along with some sufficient amount of power storage, you can throw a couple of those ingots into Victor and upgrade it to tier 5. With that out of the way, we are now going to need to upgrade the next station a little bit, Station X-Ray, because that is actually going to allow us to really progress into more advanced technology. In order to upgrade Victor any further, we're going to need that technology, so you kind of need to switch between these stations and really look around the technology tree what you need next in order to progress to the next step, and then that will also allow you to do other things in other parts of the technology tree. So it gets a little bit confusing from this point on, but yeah, just do it step by step and stick along with me and you'll be just fine. We're going to need some of these advanced circuits, so make sure you started that production as well. It fits along quite nicely in the line with the processor units and the electrical components, because all of those need each other. So just stick another Mark II assembler in there and start producing some of that. The advanced circuits will also allow you to open a door all the way back in level 4, which has a lot of useful stuff. And speaking of useful stuff, you'll also want to keep drilling your way towards level 11. So you can use the Mark IV drill bits that you can find somewhere, or just continue to produce Mark III drill bits and make sure that you keep this going while you're doing other stuff. And speaking of new stuff, in order to actually upgrade X-Ray, the first level is just some stuff that we already have, but for the second level we're going to need to make some new items. In order to do that, we're going to be smelting limestone into quicklime, and then the quicklime into cement, and we're also going to need to produce some steel. The current level of Victor actually allows us to upgrade our assembling speed and the efficiency of our biofuel. And that means setting up a manual smelting facility with just Mark I smelters is still very viable, because what I've done now is just dump a whole storage full of limestone in here to make into quicklime, and I'm still using the Mark I smelters. Now these do require fuel, but if I just drop a full stack of biobricks in here, this is actually going to run for over 18 hours without me having to refill it. So is that automated? No. But visiting these things once every 18 hours seems a pretty acceptable ratio to me without going through the hassle of setting up specific belts for the fuel. Adding in an assembler to make cement, and we have one of the two items that we need to upgrade X-Ray already done. We're also going to need some steel production, and the simple way to do that is just to set up some smelters and turn the iron bars into steel bars. Now that production rate is actually really low, so if you have any Mark II or Mark III smelters, I recommend using them here, because this will actually speed up the process quite a bit. Once you have enough, pick up some steel, pick up some cement, and upgrade the terminal to level 2. This will get you access to a whole bunch of new buildables that you can use to make your base look pretty. Some upgrades to your jumping, to your monorails. But most importantly, this is going to unlock the blast drill, which is completely going to redefine how you're going to set up your factory, along with 3 new items that you can create from stuff we're already making. And speaking of blast drills, while you're at it, you might as well start making some of those blast drills anyway, because you only need 10 of those to unlock the next tier of X-Ray, along with some mining charges that we are already producing. You are going to need reinforced iron frames in order to do that, but those are very simple to create because you just need iron frames to put into a assembler, and there you go. And tier 3 of X-Ray is going to unlock even more stuff. You're going to unlock gearboxes, electrical sets, processor arrays, but probably like a dozen new items that you can create. So if you're overwhelmed at this point, I can't blame you. But don't worry, in the next episode we're going to deal with all of that, but it is an overwhelming stage of the game, I can't deny that. This isn't helped by the fact that you're also going to unlock the blast smelter, which is a new type of smelter similar to the blast miner that is going to actually require you to fuel it with explosives in order to make more advanced materials. So even though in this episode we've massively increased our production, not just in terms of the amount of stuff we're producing thanks to the upgraded miners, smelters and assemblers, but also in terms of the technology, we've added quite a few new items to our mix already and upgraded the stations quite a bit as well. In the next episode, we're actually going to completely revamp this base, because at this point we're producing so many different things, you don't want to be hand delivering all of them anymore between your machines. Hand delivering still is very viable, especially in terms of production of machines, but the components that you need in order to make those, you definitely want to start automating a lot more than what I've done so far. So that's going to be in the next episode. If you're still here, you are awesome, and I definitely hope you join me for the next one, because it's going to be great.